Chapter 11 Song of the Solitaire. The Resonance Cascade performed a hyperspace jump, leaving the Corval system altogether and arriving in a new star system called Aeschylia. The Aeschylia system was home to another Sutherian colony. Like Edelton, Nuis was a moon orbiting a much larger world. Trig and Tenna raced to find a window. Glossum pointed at the station and said, "See that defensive platform orbiting the starbase? That's the end of the Sutherian Empire. Everything beyond that station is Nagyari territory." The Aeschylia system was devoid of traffic control systems, so starships transited the area in a chaotic fashion. Captain Cantor and Tactical Officer Roulan spent all day in the cockpit, plotting a flight path that would avoid collisions with other vessels. Trig and Tenna waited until they were done with their duties for the day, and then they tracked down Ponnico together. The children found him in the cargo bay, where he was doing maintenance on the Base Runner, a large wheeled vehicle meant for planet-side operations. The vehicle was large enough to serve as a mobile military command center, and Ponnico stood underneath of it, the top of his head a few centimeters below the Base Runner's underside. "Hello, children," he greeted Trig and Tenna. "Sir, we wanted to ask you a few questions, if you don't mind." "Not at all." Ponnico moved away from the Base Runner and sat down on a workbench. "Ask away." "Back at my place on Edelton, you said that you knew a lot more about why there are people after her," Trig said, pointing at Tenna. "And you said you might know my mother. What's going on?" Ponnico sighed. "I suppose I owe the pair of you an explanation. Young man, as I've said, I might know your mother. That is why we are flying to the homeworld now, to meet her." "Okay," Trig said, folding his arms. "Where could you have met her?" Suddenly, Tenna let out a little gasp of excitement. "Maybe they're old friends," she said. Ponnico let out a light chuckle. "Actually, an old friend is part of the story," he began. "Let me explain. About 25 years ago, there was a Nagyari man named Malum Ralpakin." "The Great Khan," Trig and Tenna said together. A dreamy expression came over Tenna's face. "I've heard all about him," she said. "The sharecroppers talk about Malum in the fields all the time. I'd watch documentaries on my breaks. He defeated the Elder One at the Great Wound, stormed the enigmatic fortress, killed the Skydrake. Oh, he was so cool. And he was a really powerful scion as well. He could make anything happen just by thinking about it." Trig and Ponnico looked at Tenna with raised eyebrows. She appeared to be starstruck. "Yes," Ponnico continued. "Well, about 25 years ago now, I was exploring holy sites, places of worship and spiritual significance. It was my spiritual journey. I traveled far beyond the luminous frontier, to parts of the galaxy not on the star charts in your school, Trig. In my journeys, I came upon a world that was long dead. I knew of its significance, though. 250,000 years ago, it was ruled by the Primogenitors, a powerful people who conquered and ruled over the luminous frontier before any of our ancestors did. And there, in the ruins of an ancient temple, I found Malum. Like me, he was on a quest for the divine. But we were questing for different reasons. I sought enlightenment. He craved the power of the gods. We talked philosophy and religion for hours over a shared meal. We did not agree on many things, yet we saw eye to eye on other issues. Eventually, our talk turned to the future, to the Sutharian independence movement and Minimar specialized industries. Eventually, I invoked the name of a personal friend of mine. His name is Manius. He worked as a soothsayer. Still does, as a matter of fact. We agreed to visit him and have our fortunes read." Tenna was hooked on Ponnico's every word. "A fortune teller," she gasped, holding her hands to her face. "That sounds incredible." Aren't fortune tellers usually scammers? Trig said. Most of them are, Ponnico conceded. When the Sutharian government outlawed psionics and banished the telepaths, most of the legitimate soothsayers packed up and left. But Manius was able to stay hidden. How were you able to find him? Trig asked. Malum was already a telepath by the time I met him, Ponnico replied, well on the path to becoming a powerful scion. He examined me and determined that I had the same innate ability as himself. He taught me to harness and control the powers of the mind. Using our telepathy, we found Manius. You're a telepath? Trig gasped. How could you have been able to hide it all this time? Telepathy is illegal. Ponnico laughed. I am no longer a telepath, my dear boy, he said. All powers have a limit, and I reached mine a very long time ago. Now, where was I? Yes, Manius. Malum and I went to him and asked for our futures. He gave a prophecy to me, but refused to scry on behalf of Malum. Manius saw something in my friend he despised, and refused to offer his services. What happened? Trig and Tenna asked. Malum turned his mind against Manius, Ponnico replied with a shudder. He invaded the soothsayer's mind as easily as one invades a house. There he found the truth. Manius had already made a prophecy for Malum and refused to share it. So Malum took it by force. After that, Malum asked me to become the first of his chosen. Trig was confused by this last statement, but Tenna's reaction quickly solved the mystery for him. Oh my God! Tenna gasped. You're one of the chosen of the Great Khan? I was, Ponnico confessed. After returning to Nagyari space, we started searching for followers. Many people came to us, looking for a better life, for wealth, power, validation. Malum offered to give the Nagyari people anything and everything they wanted. We took over. We united the Nagyari people and built the Horde. Then the conquests began. Ponnico shuddered. For 10 years, the Nagyari Horde waged war against the Olenbar and their mega-corporation. At some point, our people, the Sutharians, joined in. We were hoping to win our independence from MSI, and this is where I fell out with Malum. Fell out? The children asked. A second Sutharian joined the ranks of the Chosen, Ponnico replied. A man named Alex Kember. Tenna squealed. No way! Alex Kember? I know him! He's the one who gave me this! Tenna held out her crystal pendant. Ponnico nodded grimly. Yes, I knew he was still out there, and I am very alarmed to know he gave away one of the 6 keystone shards to a random child. Did he give it to you directly? No, Tenna replied. One of the guys who worked for him gave me the necklace and said it was a gift from Alex. Ponnico looked very uncomfortable. Yet another decision he and I would have fought over. You see, Alex wanted the Sutharians to submit to the Khan and become his satrapi. I wanted our people and the Nagyari to stand together as allies. Alex and I disagreed and argued. Our feud became violent, and Malum demanded I rethink my attitude. So, I waited for an opportunity to desert the Horde. When it came, I fled. So, you weren't there when he died? Trig could not hide the disappointment in his voice. He died about 2 months later, yes, Ponnico replied. But I was there for almost the entirety of the war. I know exactly how the Nagyari Horde does battle, And that was why I asked you about the aurora on the day your school exploded. Wait, what? Trig responded. The aurora, Ponnico repeated. That's where I drew the first connection between the con and you. You said you saw an aurora right after your school blew up. Did anyone else see it? Trig opened his mouth to speak, then paused. Now that he thought about it, nobody else had talked about seeing an aurora over Eddleton that day. Ponnico stroked his beard thoughtfully. Malum was the type of commander who would never attack unless he possessed powerful advantages. Where none existed, he would create them. Didn't you ever wonder why telepaths were exiled from the Sutherian Empire? Trig and Tenna shook their heads. Whenever the Horde planned to invade a world, Malum would send his most skilled telepaths to soften up the people who would soon be our enemies. Telepathic infiltrators! Tenna balled up her fists, sounding excited. She desperately wanted to hear more. Trig leaned forward, trying to avoid missing anything. Before the Nagyari Horde comes to a world, there would be 3 harbingers of invasion, Ponnico said. First, the infiltrators would unleash the nocturnal plague. Anyone who contracts the disease would lose the ability to dream. It would slowly degrade their mental strength over time, making them vulnerable to telepathic attack. Trig shuddered. That sounded horrible. But there was more. The second harbinger was the madness, Ponnico continued. You do not want to know about the madness. Trust me. Ponnico paused, allowing his warning to sink in. Then he said, The third harbinger of invasion, and the most well-known of the trio, was the Song of the Solitaire. Trig and Tenna felt a powerful wave of emotions sweep through their bodies. The words, Song of the Solitaire, filled them with a sense of both fear and wonder. They wanted to know what it was, but knew they would regret learning the truth. The Song of the Solitaire is a psionic life form, Ponnico said, a creature born from the energies of conscious thought, possibly the only one of its kind in the universe. Malum found a way to capture and enslave it. When the time came, he would turn it loose on the enemy world, where it would attack indiscriminately with telepathy and telekinesis. Once the world was sufficiently prepped, the Horde would invade. Ponnico stood up and grabbed Trig by the shoulder. You did not see an aurora over your school, Trig. I saw it too, and I recognized it for what it truly was. The Song of the Solitaire visited your world. I do not know why. Trig and Tenna were lost for words. They looked at one another, mouths agape, and then back at Ponnico. There is one last thing you must know, Trig, the old mercenary said. On the day Malum perished, something went horribly wrong with the Harbingers. I witnessed the disaster from the surface of Lightwater. For some reason I don't know and could not imagine, the creature went rogue. It turned against the Horde and became hostile. There was a short battle, and then Malum was slain by the Song of the Solitaire.